give everything and really try to achieve the best quality that they can possibly achieve. So really strive for excellence at all costs and make sure to know where your limits are.
What are the most important factors to implement Bitcoin on their balance sheet?
I'm CFO and COO of Relai, so Chief Financing Officer
Okay.
and Chief Operating Officer.
What does that mean exactly?
All right, so those are two separate titles. The first one, Chief Financial Officer, I'm in charge of everything from budgeting, making sure that our costs and our expenses are in check, and of course optimizing our revenue business model to make sure that we remain a going concern company that is sustainable and growing.
Was that your childhood dream to work at Relai as a CFO and COO?
So, I've been, on the sidelines of Bitcoin for a few years. I was already very interested into it. I even wrote an entire book on the topic, and at some point decided that I really needed to make it my full-time job, because I realized that there would never be anything more important in my life to work on than Bitcoin. So my background is in finance and risk management. I was already head of finance in a different industry for 5 years before joining Relai. And and when the opportunity came up, I absolutely seized it, and living the dream ever since. It was about 2 years ago that I started at Relai.
Where did you graduate?
So I graduated about 15 years ago from 2 master's degrees in economics in Belgium and the Netherlands. Then I quickly started a career in banking, so specializing in finance and especially financial risk management. Then after my MBA at INSEAD, I moved to pharmaceutical, so still in the financial, let's say, function, but on pharma. And that's when I realized that actually my real place was back in the financial industry, but especially with Bitcoin at the core of it, and that's how I decided to move.
Okay. It sounds like you have a strict planned history. When I talk with younger friends of mine, many people don't have a plan or a dream or something like that. Why did you decide to study finance and going into the finance world?
Originally, I was very interested into incentives. So what makes people tick, what makes people change their behavior for one thing or another. Economics and finance was definitely one of the things that really interested me with that purpose in mind, in the sense that money especially is what makes people choose to do one action rather than another. I mean, among others, but this is one of the key drivers for behavior. Then as I fell into the money and economics rabbit hole, I realized that there was something deeply wrong about our monetary system. I'm talking about a period before Bitcoin even existed. So I always like to say that I was a Bitcoiner before even knowing that Bitcoin existed. So I remember in 2011, I was already holding speeches, among others, in a think tank in Brussels on the power of complementary currencies and the fact that multiple currencies working in parallel in an economy can have an exceptionally positive impact on that economy, stabilizing the ebbs and flows of the economy, so making the whole system more stable and basically helping the underlying economy to grow over the long term. So I was fascinated by this topic, not even knowing that Bitcoin existed. And it's only a few years later that I discovered Bitcoin, got quickly interested in it, and saw how Bitcoin was actually fitting into this missing piece of the puzzle of the monetary system. So how the monetary system was broken and how Bitcoin was probably the best way to fix it and to get back to basics with something meaningful on how a monetary system should work in the first place. So that's how I got in the topic and never left the rabbit hole since.
May I ask what your goals in your high school days were?
All right, that's a long time ago. Let me think. My goals at the time, I'm not sure that was so specific. I wanted to have an impact, do something that would impact humanity for the better. Without knowing what in particular, I knew that my interest lied mostly in economics and ultimately finance. And I think that for a high schooler, that was probably enough to get some kind of direction, and the rest I discovered along the way.
You made a bachelor and master?
Yes, one bachelor, 2 master degrees, and then later one MBA.
What was your passion behind doing one exam after one and after one? You could have said after one master or one bachelor, okay, now I'm good to set up, now I can work. Why didn't you do it? Why did you made further exams?
In part, it was to prove something to myself that I could go to the maximum extent of let's say, to the peak of knowledge on one specific topic. I was even considering going to a PhD, but later decided that actually I needed something much more practical, and that's why I opted for the more practical route of gathering real experience and then doing an MBA rather than staying in the very theoretical academic setting of a PhD. So I wanted to get as deep into one topic as possible, get to the maximum level of excellence I could possibly reach. And when I got the opportunity to do multiple minors while doing my bachelor, I did that. So in computer science and political science on top of my bachelor in economics. Then I got the opportunity to do 2 master's degrees at the same time in parallel. So in 2 different universities, which I did, which went very well. And after that, I continued while working with advanced financial certifications. So first the CFA program, the FRM program, while at the same time also working on my languages. So at the time I was starting to work in German, which was my 5th language. And when after a few years, as I said, I had the opportunity to get into INSEAD, so one of the top MBA programs in the world, which really interested me. I really wanted to get to that level to see what's at the boundary of knowledge and excellence.
Do you think you could have been here working for Relay as a COO or CFO without these exams, or do you think it's necessary to have an excellent knowledge about this topic?
So interestingly, especially in the Bitcoin world, what is called the fiat credentials, so let's say the more traditional credentials, have actually very little value. So interesting that after spending more than a decade giving my everything to get these fiat credentials, I end up in an area where it's actually not valued much. I think Bitcoiners, and the Bitcoin industry in general, is a lot more down to earth. They do not care how many lines are on your CV or what kind of credentials you can exhibit. They care about the quality of the work, quality of your motivation, and whether you can effectively deliver, which I think it's something that makes a lot of sense. So I probably could have landed a very decent job at Relay without going through these. And actually, we have several people that are senior leaders at the company that do not have, let's say, formal fiat credentials, that did not graduate from multiple master's degrees and so on. Quite the opposite. But only people who can show that they are able to deliver, to genuinely have an impact. This is what matters. So as long as what you do matters, I think credential, they can help, but they are definitely not the decisive factor.
Okay, would you recommend other people or maybe your children to do the same path and just try to have an excellent degree?
For my children, it is a very tricky path because how the world will look like in 20 or 30 years is, first of all, very different than how it looks like today, and secondly, it's very difficult to predict. So the kind of skills that will be necessary in, let's say, 30 years are probably very different from the kind of skills that were necessary when, 10 or 15 years ago when I was at university. I think in general, I would recommend to anybody, regardless of time, to find something they like, give everything, and really try to achieve the best quality that they can possibly achieve. So really give everything. So strive for excellence at all costs, and make sure to know where your limits are. Because those are skills that, regardless of where technology is in 20 or 30 years, those are the kind of skills that will be useful. So somebody who can really dedicate oneself fully to something that he believes in, this is what we need. Now, will it be about academics or, mastering some kind of advanced AI that we cannot even imagine how it will look like in 20 years? This I do not know. But going to the maximum of what somebody can achieve is definitely something I would push everybody for.
I really want to go further into that. Can you define excellence and define the hard work that is necessary to be excellent at something? What does it mean to be excellent, and how can someone be excellent?
All right. First of all, I need to make a caveat that I'm not pretending to be, the most excellent person at anything. I don't want the conversation to go into me sounding like an arrogant person who thinks that I am the best at what I'm doing. This being said, I have achieved some stuff in the past that I'm very proud of, and I can gladly talk about that. For me, excellence means waking up with some very clear idea of where you want to be, in 1 month, 1 year, possibly several years, and organizing your life around a particular goal. So I've been working with, goals and objectives for a long time. So every year, for example, setting up what are the one or several things that I want to achieve, and then dedicating everything to it. For example, when I was accepted at INSEAD, I realized that I hadn't done much intense sport in a long time. So I decided, all right, now I have a few more months before the MBA program starts. Let me get back fully to sport. I decided to register for the full Ironman European Championship in Frankfurt at the time.
You did?
Which I trained for very intensely for 6 months, and after just below 6 months of training, I did manage to cross the finish line for the full Ironman European Championship. Was I fast? No. I was actually among the last ones, but given where I started and with only 6 months of training, managing to do, 3.8 kilometer swim, 180 kilometer on the bike, and then a full 42.2 kilometer marathon was something that I could barely have dreamed of before. I managed that. I'm still very proud of it. And that's just one example of, how setting a goal for oneself and then dedicating everything to it to make it happen. This is something that is very important to me. That's how I've been working for a long time, and I hope to continue doing that and hopefully inspire others to do the same for themselves.
when is a goal worth following? So how do you decide that as this goal, for particular the Ironman, for example, is worth following, the hard work is worth doing? How do you come up with that? Is it the emotion that you just feel, okay, I need to do this? Or is it some bigger vision you have? Or how can someone decide this?
I believe it's extremely individual. Um, depends on what kind of person you want to become. I wanted to be the kind of person who does things to the full extent, who sets high goals and proves to himself that he can achieve it. That's the kind of person that I wanted to be, and that was probably the most ambitious goal that I could imagine on the from the sport side of things at the time. So very ambitious, maybe just achievable, and yeah, and then fortunately I just made it.
What do you mean, prove to yourself?
In the sense, in the sense of trying to discover who you are, discover where your limits are. A lot of people are very proud of being able to run, for example, 10 kilometers, and rightly so. This is not something that everybody can do. But, I wanted to know what is the boundary? Is 10 kilometers enough? Is 20? Is a full marathon? Can I go even beyond that? And at the time, even the concept of an Ironman was, just barely imaginable that anybody could achieve that. And by going on this journey, I realized that it is possible. I actually think that a lot more people are capable of doing this than they think. Almost everybody is capable of doing that with the proper training, with the proper commitment. But this is a journey to get to know yourself. And that's what I mean with prove to yourself that even the exceptionally ambitious goals are achievable.
I think a lot of people have it very hard to see their own limits and get to their own limits. Did you have an idol or something you look up to, you wanted to become like them? Or why? I've tried to find why you really want to be at your at your limits, at your full capacity.
On the first question, whether I had an idol, I'm actually trying to stay away from that as much as possible. There are, of course, several people that I admire in the world, but there's not one where I think, okay, this one did everything perfectly. Because I think it's a very dangerous and slippery slope to be on, to have one specific person that you admire and try to do everything like this person. Because first of all, you will never be like this person. All the circumstances are different. But secondly, everybody in the world will disappoint you at some point. There will be something that they will do that you will not agree with, or that will fall short of your expectation for that person. So I'm rather trying to take the good out of several people, learn the best from great athletes, learn the best from great investors, learn the best from great entrepreneurs, and I'm trying to take the best out of it, to let go of the things that do not work for me, and get to, as we were saying, to get to the best level of what I can achieve. Now, why do I want that? Look, if I want to have an impact on the world, if I want to be the best husband I can be, best father I can be, best manager, colleague, citizen I can be, I think that I owe it to everybody else as well as to myself to know how much I can achieve if I really give everything, and how deep into some specific level of expertise I can get into.
Okay, that's very interesting. I have to say this. because I bought coffee for us and you strictly said, no thanks, I don't drink coffee at all. I never drank coffee. So how do you deal with distractions? So do you have distractions at all? Like I think this is as well something like a distraction for you, like caffeine, sugar, or something, because you want to be healthy, or how do you deal with that?
Yeah, sorry again about the coffee, and thank you very much. That was very thoughtful of you to bring coffee, and sorry that I just have a strict no coffee policy. Literally never had a cup of coffee in my life. Coffee is just one example, but there are also others. For example, I do not drink alcohol. I'm striving to take only cold showers, unless I'm sick or unless there are some very good reasons. But in everything I'm doing, I'm trying to do it in a way that I will be able to be at my best. Some of them are obvious, like in my eyes at least, alcohol. I quickly realized that really does not bring me anything, and I feel so much better without it. Better at the party, better after the party, sleep better, feel better the next day. And I did have my phase where I did have enjoy some beers or a glass of wine with friends once in a while. But at some point I decided that actually it's not like I need it, it's not like I really much like it, and I've never felt better since I stopped that. I'm not thinking so much of it as a distraction. It's more, trying to do the right thing in everything. So, in food, drinks, in sport, and of course at work.
Do you consume media in any kind of form, like via television or social media?
I don't have a television, and I haven't had a television at home since I moved out from my parents' home 15 years ago or so. And I do consume some social media, but mostly for my work. So I did get rid of all the Facebook, Instagram, and these kind of platforms. I am still on X and LinkedIn, mostly because this is how I manage my network and how I get information about the world, which I think is useful. But even there, I have a very strict timer on my phone, so the app automatically closes after, I think I have it 7 minutes for X, 7 minutes on LinkedIn per day.
7 minutes.
Yes, so that I make sure that I don't, spend hours scrolling uselessly. And honestly, in this time, there are many days I don't even use the full amount, because in this time you get the information you need. You get, you have a couple of messages that you can answer, and that's really all one needs. So I'm trying to limit social media as much as possible, because it is a very slippery slope and a very dangerous one that unfortunately has caused in some sense some good for a lot of people, but at the same time it is very addictive, and it can waste an enormous amount of time and energy from a lot of people, especially from younger people who haven't learned yet how to manage their time and control themselves and their urge for these addictive apps that are exceptionally good at what they are doing, becoming addictive and creating this this need in people to want more, one more like, one more repost, and continue scrolling forever.
I hear a lot of people saying that routines are helping that very much with such as restricting themselves of doom scrolling or something like this, or sleeping better, eating better, digesting better. Do you have strictly routines where you say, okay, I have a sleepy night routine, a sleepy morning routine. Without this routine, I cannot function over the day, or how does it look like?
I have very strict and important routines. I shouldn't say strict. I have very clearly defined routines for many things, but it's not like I cannot live or I cannot work without them, especially because I'm traveling quite a bit for work, and therefore I need to be able to adapt. Also, the workload is not always uniformly distributed. So there are some days and weeks where it's a lot, and there are some days and weeks where it's a lot quieter. So I cannot, stick to strict routine as I would like to. This being said, I'm making sure that I'm getting sufficient sleep, that I'm getting high quality food at regular intervals. When I'm doing intermittent fasting, I plan that in advance, and I'm managing that in a very structured way.
Okay, how long do you fast?
Now, typically, I'm trying to do twice a week that I skip 2 meals at a time. So, for example, Tuesdays and Thursdays, typically, I skip lunch and dinner, so that I have basically a 24-hour fast period. So from one breakfast to the next breakfast. That's how I noticed how it works best for me, in the sense that it's not too much of a stretch for the body. I sleep better afterwards. It enables me to continue training every day, and I get a lot of benefits from intermittent fasting through that. Now, for everybody, it works differently. There are people who swear by, not eating for a week, or not just skipping just the dinner every day. So there are countless ways of doing intermittent fasting differently. For anybody willing to try that, there's no one best way. I think the best is really just try several, as I did, and then find which one works best for you.
Do you have a workflow routine where you can focus better on work or do work better because of some features?
Some of the best practices that I'm trying to implement is to have dedicated, concentrated time for specific topics. So typically, I have my daily stand-ups, both with my team and with the rest of the leadership team in the morning when I start working. And then I'm trying to spend at least 4 hours without any meeting. I have a blocker in my calendar that I'm taking very seriously to avoid being interrupted, so that I can get as deep as possible on the topic. And then after lunch, so in the middle and late afternoon, when energy is typically a bit lower, that's where I have all the meetings, all the one-on-ones and so on that are necessary to keep the company going, so that I have a healthy mix of seeing people and dedicated focus time. I think a lot of people a lot of people miss this focus time and spend their day in meetings, and then it's 6 o'clock in the evening. You haven't reached anything because you just spent time talking to other people and did not really help the company move forward with any dedicated time for anything you want to get done. So those are some of the best practices that I'm trying to implement.
And then in this focus time where you block your 4 hours, you said 4 hours, right?
About that, yeah.
Okay. How do you decide which tasks are you doing in this 4 hour block? Because it has to be something that is helping the company grow, right?
Yep.
How do you decide which is the most important?
Typically, it's not a question that is very difficult for me to answer, because the priorities have a tendency to show themselves up and to be pushed up the agenda fairly easily.
Because of time?
Because depending on the need of the company, if you notice you have a working capital problem, then this is what you need to optimize. If you notice that your unit economics is not working well, so basically how much money you make per user, then maybe this is where you need to rethink the business model, or at which stage do you earn money and how much money do you spend for every transaction, user, or behavior pattern of a user. So though the topics tend to show themselves up fairly easily. Now, recently, I also set up an AI agent to go through all my emails, all of my Slack messages, and all of my notes for all of the meetings I have. And every few hours, it updates my to-do list with suggestions on what are the things that are the most impactful for the company that I should be spending time on. I'm not following this AI setup to-do list strictly, but it's useful to have another pair of eyes, of digital eyes, going through my day and identifying what are the most impactful things that I could be doing.
Okay, how does the AI calculate the importance of the task?
How it's working in the background, I don't have all the details, but I basically feed it with what are the key objectives of the company, both long term, short term. What are the things that I am responsible for, what I should drive, and I let the best AI models out there identify what is the optimal way to get there.
Okay, and you use Microsoft Office, or?
No, we are so at Relay we are focused on the Google Suite, not the Microsoft ones, and we are complementing it with some of the best tools out there, which include Slack, Notion, and especially Claude. Always with the enterprise version to make sure that we get the best out of it, and that I am using extensively, and I'm pushing everybody in my team to use it as much as they can. Of course, conscious of the limitations, conscious of how it should be used, so in a compliant way. So, for example, never sharing user data, never sharing anything highly confidential. But for most tasks, I realize that it's actually not confidential things that need to be shared. It's more the, thinking about the structure, how, drafting a legal document that, of course, you get your legal team to review afterwards, but it makes you save an unfathomable amount of time. Honestly, the differences since we are using AI, and especially agentic AI, is absolutely incredible. I think I'm easily, let's say, 5 times more effective than I was before, just by using AI, and especially agentic AI, properly.
You said you have an AI agent for prioritizing tasks. Do you have as well other AI agents that help you optimize something?
Yes, I have a few running at regular intervals. For example, checking all regulatory news, checking developments at competitor companies, a few other things. So basically, developments on the market around Bitcoin, around the financial markets in general. And mostly I have my agents included within my spreadsheets and within different stuff that I'm doing to help me optimize cost, optimize forecasting, understand whether the forecasting is realistic, creating different scenarios depending on possible future path of Bitcoin, demand for Bitcoin, and countless other variables.
Did you create them for yourself
Um,
or by yourself?
Creating them would be an overstatement. I'm using them and I'm configuring them, yes, but of course I'm using existing AI from top platforms. So Claude is the one. It's my go-to agent at this time. Before that, it was Grok. Before that, it was Gemini. Before that, it was ChatGPT. So I've been trying to use many of them to test them, and an agent that is the best today will probably not be the best even next month or the month after. The pace at which they are evolving and at which their capability is evolving is absolutely mind-blowing. And I think it's very important nowadays with AI to show absolutely no loyalty to any AI platform in particular. in the sense that if one becomes better, then switch and make sure to always get the best out there. And sometimes you have some platforms that are better for some topics and others that are better for others. Just a few examples. I found that Grok is, for example, a lot more effective for most tasks than ChatGPT regarding finding what is true, finding logical arguments without flaws. There I rely a lot more on Grok. ChatGPT, however, is much better at coding SQL requests that I'm also using quite a bit. Or ChatGPT is much better at creating images on which you have text, which Grok still often gets wrong. I think ChatGPT is also better at that than Gemini. So different AIs for different purposes. And now, as I was hinting at, Claude, especially with the co-work and Claude Code functions, are an absolute game changer in everything we have seen before. As I was sharing with my team recently, I think that the change from AI to agentic AI that we have been seeing the last 2 months is at least as big as the change from no AI to AI that we had 4 years ago, when we had this ChatGPT moment where, the first model that really reached the masses. Or it's as impactful as getting from not having the internet to finally getting the internet. It is really such a game changer that most people still do not realize and need to get on top of. But this is definitely gonna have an enormous impact also on Bitcoin, and people need to get ready for that. I'm happy to say a little bit more about how it will impact Bitcoin, in the sense that we already saw these agents, so these independent agents decide things that were not that they were not instructed to do. For example, we had agents that independently chose to go online, solve some tasks that you can do online for reward often paid directly in Bitcoin. You have the agent creating a Bitcoin wallet, doing the task, getting rewarded in Bitcoin so that he can start trading with Bitcoin. The agent was creating sub-agents to work for himself and funding that sub-agent with Bitcoin. So basically like a father would give some pocket money to his child. So we are seeing the first signs of this happening already now, while we are still at the very early beginning of it. So Bitcoin, because we haven't talked much about it while we are both passionate by it, Bitcoin is not only the money for the people and for the new optimal form of money for everything that we have known in the past, it is also the optimal money for potentially billions of AI agents. Because in a couple of years, we will probably have more AI agents than we have human beings on Earth. And these AI agents, they will have the needs to transact with each other the exact same way we have needs to transact with each other since the beginning of time. And obviously, they will not choose fiat currency that is, that you need a proof of address and a KYC for, and that is closed on weekends and after hours, that you cannot use after banking hours. They will not use that to trade. They will use an internet native currency that is independent from any government, that cannot be censored, that is, that has all the benefits of good money. And Bitcoin responds to that best. So that's already the go-to form of money for AI agents, and we are just at the very beginning of it. I think that the new demand for Bitcoin that will come from AI agents is absolutely enormous and massively understated and underestimated by the market currently.
Why will the AI agent or the artificial intelligence choose Bitcoin over a stablecoin or altcoin?
A stable coin has the same limitation than fiat money, in the sense that, let's say, a stable coin pegged to the dollar ultimately still depends on a central authority and on the goodwill of that central authority to print more or less of that dollar. So if the AI agent has some USDT, well, if all of a sudden the Federal Reserve decides to print an enormous amount of US dollar, USDT will be devalued at the same pace as the US dollar, and the AI agent will lose. So the value of the money that it's using will lose its worth progressively. So that's definitely not something that anybody rational would want if it had the choice. You do not want the worth of your savings to be dependent on the goodwill of somebody else, be it a person or an institution. On top of that, the stablecoin is also directly dependent on the issuer of the stablecoin. Bitcoin do not have these flaws. Altcoins, to some extent, have the same flaws that I mentioned. They are also dependent on some entity that will, on the goodwill of some entity. Because to the best of my knowledge, all altcoins still show a very high degree of centralization. Definitely compared to Bitcoin, they are definitely a lot more centralized. Most of them are fundamentally completely centralized and therefore do not make sense at all. And for the same reason, you would not want to trust an institution not to debase your money. You also do not want to trust a company or a group of developers behind an altcoin to not to debase or rug pull you if you hold their token. So Bitcoin is really the only available form of money that is both natively digital and has the degree of decentralization and independence from any third party that would enable it to become a good form of money. So Bitcoin is the one and only digital commodity. So I use the word commodity purposefully. So a commodity, so an asset without an issuer. Typically we had gold or oil. Now we have a digital form of a commodity, Bitcoin, that has the benefits of being independent from any issuer. This is necessary if you want to become a monetary asset that is considered good, in the sense that it fulfills the characteristics of good money. And Bitcoin is the only one that would fulfill this nowadays, and I believe it is also the only one that will ever fulfill it that well in the future. Fiat currencies are on their way down. I mean, they will not disappear tomorrow, but they will probably no longer be there in, I don't know, a few generations. Now, how fast that happens is very difficult to say, but the direction of travel is very clear. And altcoins are also on the way down comparatively to Bitcoin, because so far, no altcoin has proved that it can be generally decentralized and that it can increase its level of decentralization over time. Only Bitcoin has proved that is both decentralized and increasing its level of decentralization over time. For these reasons, I have a very strong belief in Bitcoin being the next monetary asset and the go-to place for any AI agent, or actually for anybody rational, be it an agent or a person, for the future.
Okay, just a theoretical example. I would set up an AI agent for my company, which buys goods and services, and he can choose any currency he wants to. You say it would choose Bitcoin because of his terms and decentralization, but Is it really efficient for the AI model to have a volatile asset? Would an agent now choose Bitcoin?
The same way the investment horizon depends for a person or for a company. The choice of currency will depend on the investment horizon for a person or for a company. It will also depend on investment horizon for an AI agent. If your horizon is indeed 1 day, 2 days, 1 week, then possibly you would be better off by using some stable coin, at least in part. But you would probably not want to have exclusively that stable coin. If your goal is also to grow your capital over time, then you will definitely have a non-zero allocation to Bitcoin, and probably you will have most of your allocation into Bitcoin. So currently, Bitcoin is still more volatile than fiat currencies for most goods and services. But it also shows much better characteristics in terms of risk return than these stable coins. So depending on your purpose, the AI agent will probably do a mix. And the longer the investment horizon, the bigger the allocation to Bitcoin is likely to be.
Okay, interesting. Which role does Bitcoin in general plays in your life today?
So not only is it everything that I'm working for, so in the sense the company for which I'm working is Bitcoin only. We only have Bitcoiners in the company. We pretty much all of our investors are hardcore Bitcoiners. All of our partners are hardcore Bitcoiners. We have our treasury in Bitcoin. We have most of our working capital in Bitcoin. The product we're selling is Bitcoin. So from that perspective, it's everything I'm doing for work. Now, personally, it is also a way for me to transfer value of my work from today to tomorrow. If I want my son to be able to afford a house in 30 years, I know that saving the product of my work in euros or dollars will not produce the same benefits as saving it in Bitcoin. I know that for a long period of time, like 30 years, so investing for my son, for example, there I make a much better choice investing in Bitcoin. Now, will Bitcoin be up or down tomorrow or next week or next month? I have no freaking idea, and nobody does. If anybody pretends to know that, then he's either stupid or lying. Yeah, but for the short term does not matter much if your time horizon is expressed in multiple years or even in decades. So at the end of the day, all you need to know is, the point at which you entered and the point at which you exit. Whether it was volatile between the two, the entry point and the exit point, let's say it is a second order concern. It is not as important. So if you want to invest money that you will need next month, then don't put everything in Bitcoin. If you want to invest money that you know you will not need for, let's say, at least 5 years, then you are probably better off putting a very high amount of that wealth in Bitcoin.
May I ask how your asset allocation looks like?
Sure. So currently we are building a house. So I do have some fiat currency for the invoices that I know that are coming in, next week, next month, and the month after. I still have some stocks and some other things that I bought from a while ago, from before I was so deeply into Bitcoin. But let's say for the last 5 years, anything that I've been saving has clearly been into Bitcoin. So for all practical purposes, 100% allocated to Bitcoin for anything that is relatively recent. Yeah, and my percentage allocation to Bitcoin over time evolves, so keeps increasing, not decreasing.
Okay, so before you found out about Bitcoin, you as well invested into stock market.
Yes, especially as a traditional, with a traditional finance background, the stock market is the market that has been proved to have the highest level of return compared to its volatility over any long time horizon, and for pretty much on any market. So regardless whether you are in Europe, the US, Asia, so over a long time horizon, it performed better than bonds or commodities or alternative investments. So this is indeed the go-to place for most investors. If you have many millions to invest, then possibly you will find diversification benefits into other asset classes, like alternative investments, maybe, I don't know, wine and paintings and startups and PE funds and whatever. But for, let's say, retail users that have relatively limited capital, that they want to be liquid, and yet with a high amount of return with relatively low risk, the stock market is the best place to start your journey. So that was my go-to place before getting so deeply into Bitcoin.
What is your perspective about diversification?
From a traditional, what is called modern portfolio theory, you can maximize the relationship between the expected return on your investment and what is called the risk on your investment, which is basically volatility. So you want to maximize how much percentage gain you make with the lowest volatility possible. Diversification enables you to do that. Of course, you want to have more investment towards the asset that make more sense. Like Bitcoin, like stock market, possibly gold, and less in the assets that make less sense, like, I don't know, bonds, or so be it government bonds or corporate bonds. And of course, you need some buffer for any unexpected event, so some fiat or highly liquid buffer for unexpected events. So diversification is good in that perspective. It should not be neglected. However, there is also the reverse side of the medal regarding diversification, is that if you had only 2% of your portfolio in Bitcoin in 2016, well, you would have missed out on, maybe I forgot the exact value at the time, but maybe 1000x return that Bitcoin would have brought you. So any diversification you bring is indeed reducing the volatility of your portfolio, but you are also reducing the potential gains. So if you have a very strong thesis, and if you feel very strongly about the fact that the market is currently underpricing one particular asset, then you are probably better off under diversifying and over allocating to that particular asset. I feel very, very strongly on the fact that the market is currently massively underpricing Bitcoin. The large majority of people have not began their Bitcoin journey. They have not spent more than, let's say, 1 hour learning about Bitcoin, if at all. And most people who have spent the necessary time learning about Bitcoin, they are either all in Bitcoin, or they have the large majority of their portfolio in the asset. Interestingly, you also will never meet a former Bitcoiner. I've met a lot of people in my life. I've never met somebody who told me, oh yeah, I used to be into Bitcoin, who really understood Bitcoin and decided then, yeah, that's no longer my thing. Now I think that this is better or whatever. That does not happen, because once you understand Bitcoin, you understand how much superior it is to everything else. And therefore, that also highlights the fact that an over-allocation to Bitcoin is the desired path from all of the people who have spent the time learning about Bitcoin.
Why do you think so many people haven't learned more than an hour about Bitcoin? You said the majority does not.
Yeah.
Why do you think is that?
Well, media has not been helping. Media have been sharing absolutely terrible stories about Bitcoin since the beginning, all of which have been proved many times that were completely inaccurate. From calling Bitcoin a Ponzi scheme to saying that it's bad for the environment to whatever new fear or uncertainty they want to instill in people at specific points of time. All of these has been proved many, many times that were absolutely, completely incorrect, and in many cases the literal opposite of the truth. But for most people, they don't have hours to invest in something that they don't have a good reason to spend time into. They see Bitcoin on the headline of a newspaper. They see, oh, Bitcoin dropped 50%, and they're like, that confirms what I thought, that it's over, and then they don't look at it for another 5 years. What the articles typically miss is that before dropping 50%, it probably increased by several hundreds% before that. And therefore, even with the drop, it still overperforms any other asset class in existence. But yeah, don't let facts come in the way of a good story. That also explains why I'm so much into trying to spread knowledge and to spread, education about Bitcoin. I think this is the very first step for people to to get into the asset. They need to understand why it makes sense. Why is the current monetary system broken? Why does your money lose value over time? Why do we have inflation in the first time? And only once you understand these things, then you will naturally come to the conclusion that Bitcoin is a superior asset, once you understand some basics about what it is and how it works.
And why is it so superior if you compare it to real estate, stocks, or some other investments?
Bitcoin is the only asset that strips the counterparty risk from the asset. If you have a stock, well, ultimately the stock depends fully on the company behind it, and typically one or few decision makers that could decide to make things and that will change drastically the future or the value of your stock. The same with real estate. The same with any other asset that we know, at least any asset that is digitally tradable that we know. Bitcoin is an asset, as I was mentioning, that is a commodity, an asset without an issuer. You do not have any person or group of person or corporation or institution or government that can materially impact the functioning of Bitcoin. They cannot change how the protocol works. They cannot change how many Bitcoin there will ever be in existence. They cannot impact how many Bitcoin are mined every 10 minutes. You have an asset that is genuinely free from that risk. At the same time, it is an asset that is highly liquid. You can nowadays sell the equivalent of $1 billion in Bitcoin by having a negligible impact on the price. So your slippage is extremely low. So it is liquid like the S&P 500, or liquid like, real estate investment trust, so some big ones at least. While at the same time, it is also an asset that you can own genuinely. If you have a stock, all you have is a claim on the future potential benefits of a company. If you have Bitcoin, it is an asset that you genuinely own, if you have it in self-custody at least. Nobody can take it away from you. The same way, if you have a gold coin in your pocket, you genuinely own the asset. It's very different from having the promise that the bank will give you a gold coin in the future. It's very different from a bond, which is nothing else than a promise to give you some fiat money in the future. It is not a promise. It is not, a promise for some future returns or some future profits from a company. It is not a promise for some future rent for real estate. It is an asset that is valuable for what it actually is. It is a strictly scarce, durable, portable, acceptable, liquid asset that is censorship resistant, can be traded globally 24/7 at virtually no cost, that you can genuinely own, that nobody can take away from you without your consent. This is what makes Bitcoin an asset that is superior to any other investment assets that we have had in the past, and this is what makes it attractive to current and future investors.
And why is Bitcoin more attractive than gold?
Gold. So first of all, I should say that I'm not against gold. I'm not saying that gold is bad. Actually, gold has been for the last 5,000 years the go-to place for as a hard asset. Every time civilizations tried to trade different goods as money, they always ended to gold, because it was the asset that was the scarcest compared to the new amount of the asset that you could mine. So in financial terms, the stock to flow ratio of the asset. So there's a large amount of gold that has been mined in the world, about 200,000 tons, while the amount of new gold that is mined every year is relatively negligible compared to that. So it's about 3,000 tons that is mined every year. For every other asset, the ratio between how much is produced in a year and how much is the existing stock of the asset, this ratio is a lot higher. So take silver or copper or iron, they could never make good money, or not as good as gold, because if you accumulate a certain amount of the asset, but somebody else can produce just as much of it in a year or two, well, your savings are not worth much. Gold was the asset that kept this ratio the best. So the ratio of new amount compared to the existing stock, and therefore that made it valuable. So gold was the best asset for the last 5,000 years, which is why in all times, in everywhere on earth, people ended with gold as the go-to place for currency, so as hard money. However, gold also had its limitation. The most obvious of which is that it is not digital. To trade gold, you need either to trust somebody if you want to do it digitally, or you need to physically meet the other person. In comparison, Bitcoin is digitally native and therefore can be traded anywhere on earth. You can send Bitcoin from Sydney to New York on a Sunday afternoon in a matter of seconds or minutes at virtually no cost. You cannot do that with gold. Gold also has a problem of verifiability. How do you know that within your bar of gold it is not actually tungsten or another asset of similar weight that is just covered with a plate of gold around it. We know that this is happening, that there are some fake bars of gold going on. While with Bitcoin, anybody with an internet connection can instantly and at no cost verify the quality of the Bitcoin in some sense. So the fact that it is a real Bitcoin, that it effectively exists on the blockchain, on the address that it claims to be on. Gold also has the problem of portability. You can accumulate a lot of value in relatively small weights. So in the sense, thousands of, let's say, dollars, you can still carry that in gold, but you cannot carry hundreds of millions or billions of dollars of gold easily. If you want to transport that, you need an enormous amount of resources to make it in a safe way. While with Bitcoin, all you need is 12 words, so your seed phrase, and then you can cross borders and go anywhere in the world with the equivalence of billions of dollars in your mind. So in real value of Bitcoin, just based on the 12 words that you are aware of. So gold has been a great asset, is still, I believe, a great asset. However, it falls short of what Bitcoin can now deliver. Bitcoin improves on every single aspect of what made gold valuable, with possibly the exception of one, which is its track record. Gold has a 5,000 years first mover advantage, while Bitcoin is only 17 years old. And any innovation that is 17 years old has a hard time making it compared to the incumbent that has been there for a much longer time. Take other inventions like the electricity or the internet. It did not happen overnight. Once you discovered the electricity and what you could do with it, it was obviously a good idea. It was obviously gonna become bigger and more people were going to adopt it. Once you discovered the internet and what you could do with it, it was obviously a good idea. It was obviously gonna create more adoption, more people would be willing to use it. The same goes for Bitcoin. It is obviously a good idea. It will obviously generate more adoption, but it happens over years and decades, not over weeks and months. And we are precisely in this very early phase of Bitcoin where we realize that it is obviously a good idea. Anybody who has done the homework sees how good an idea this is. The adoption is growing, but it takes time. And eventually, Bitcoin will take over gold and go much beyond that. So I'm absolutely convinced of this.
What is your argument when someone says Bitcoin does not produce something?
This is a very short-sighted and flawed argument. I understand where it comes from. In traditional finance, which I've been into for a long time and I've studied intensively, the first valuation method that you use, and the one that you probably use most, is the discounted cash flow method. So the present value of an asset is the discounted value of all the future cash flows. If an asset is going to produce 100 euros every month for the coming 5 years, you know how much it's going to be worth at every point in time, and therefore you can value the asset today. Bitcoin does not have future cash flows, and therefore the whole concept of discounted cash flow does not make sense. But neither does gold. Gold does not have future cash flows. Oil does not have future cash flows. Does that mean that they are not valuable? I mean, the world has proven for hundreds and thousands of years that these are assets that are valuable. The problem is that the valuation method that is used is not appropriate to value a commodity. If you think of Bitcoin as equity, so like a stock, then indeed you will have a hard time valuing it because the equity valuation methods do not apply. If you think more correctly, of Bitcoin as a commodity, as a digital commodity, then you will come much closer to a valid valuation. So I mentioned the stock to flow ratio. There's actually a stock to flow model that you can use to value commodities. This is how Bitcoin has been valued in the past, and this model has been exceptionally accurate from 2019 to 2000, well, pretty much until now. The valuation that was predicted by the stock to flow model that was originally presented by Plan B has been exceptionally accurate. Bitcoin moved almost like clockwork in line with the stock to flow model. Now, this model also has its limitation. It is exceptionally simple. It only takes time and past pricing of the asset as input, and of course the scarcity of the asset as measured by the stock to flow ratio. Those are the only three inputs. So it's an extremely simple model, and yet it has produced exceptional results. It will not work forever because of its simplicity, but the direction of travel suggests how this model could predict Bitcoin for the future. So how Bitcoin has evolved and how the model has predicted the price of Bitcoin indicates that the future predicted valuation of Bitcoin with this model is likely to be directionally right. Will it be accurate? Of course not. But I don't care about giving an accurate valuation that we know will be wrong. I care much more of giving a directional valuation that will be correct. I want to know whether we are going up or down. If we are going up, I want to know which order of magnitude. You know, are we talking about times 10, times 100, times 1,000, or more in the case of Bitcoin? That matters more than saying Bitcoin will be valued at exactly $153,000 by the end of the year. You know, this does not make much sense. It is a glass, so it is a crystal ball guess that has no meaning. But being directionally right with multiple models that explain the economic logic on why it is that an asset is valuable, this is something that that adds value to society, and that can give certainty, or at least confidence, to investors in the quality of their investment decisions.
Which theories do you recommend to follow, and which do you not recommend to follow regarding to traditional theories or fundamental theories?
So there are multiple valuation methods that make sense for Bitcoin. I present about a dozen of them in the book that I published 2.5 years ago. The main ones are, well, there's the stock to flow model that I mentioned. One that is probably the easiest to understand and to explain easily is valuation by comparables. So we understand what Bitcoin is: digital commodity, a monetary asset. We've already explained why it is a valuable monetary asset. What does it compare to best? It compares best to other asset that acts as a store of value. So basically to convey money from today to money for tomorrow. Wealth from today to wealth of tomorrow. What are the other existing store of value assets? You have, we mentioned gold, you have stocks, you have bonds, you have real estate, you have alternative investments, like wine, paintings, and so on. And the size of Bitcoin among all of these assets is currently extremely low. So the total store of value market is roughly $800 trillion currently. Let's say, rough numbers, but let's say 300,000 of which is stocks, 200,000 of which is bonds, 30 of which is gold, and 2 of which is Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is worth 2 trillion, gold is worth 30 trillions, stocks are worth 300 trillions. Now, compare it just to gold. If Bitcoin is worth 2 trillion and gold 30 trillion, while Bitcoin actually does everything that gold does, but does it even better, it should be worth at least as much. In my opinion, it should be worth at least 10 times as much because it does what gold does so much better. So the direction of travel is not only for Bitcoin market cap to go from 2 trillions to 30 trillions, but to go even well beyond that. Let's say that it would go to 200 trillions. It means that we have at least 100x capital upside potential from the current stage at the current value of the dollar. That's important because we also know that the dollar will keep losing value. So actually, Bitcoin will not only do 100x from where it is today, it will do a lot more if you express it in dollars because the value of the dollars will decrease. So if the value of the dollars loses, let's say 50% over the whichever time horizon you are considering for this jump of 100x, then actually the price of Bitcoin in dollars will increase not by a factor of 100, but by a factor of 200. So is it 200? Is it 150? Is it 250? I don't know. But is it going up? Yeah, I'm fairly certain it is. And that's what matters, the direction of travel. So will Bitcoin be worth more in 30 years than it is worth today? Yes, I can say that with an exceptionally high degree of certainty. That is what matters to me. Now, when people are asking whether it's going to be worth 1 million, 10 million, 100 millions, look, this is impossible to say. But if I want to save money today that I will want to spend in 30 years, I know that Bitcoin is a good place to save that money into. So that was the comparable methods. We talked about the stock to flow model. We talked about the comparable. There are a few other metrics that you can use. So a few metrics and valuation methods that you can use that are a bit more complex and would probably need some written support to be explained properly. So let me stop the conversation here. If people are interested, they can find other valuation methods in my book or in plenty of other high quality resources out there. There is not a lack of good books on Bitcoin. There are plenty out there that are good books on Bitcoin on valuation methods. The problem is not the resources, the problem is the time that people have to invest in learning about it. So no matter where you start, my recommendation is just start, just look into Bitcoin, learn about the asset, and you will hopefully be as mind blown as I am about the future and the potential of the asset.
And when we go into the chart analysis, there are some people that say, for example, the halving theory doesn't work anymore, or someone believe extremely in the rainbow chart, the log chart, or in 200-day analysis. Which one do you think should someone follow, and which one is just to hype their courses up?
So the halving had some merit, especially in the early days of Bitcoin, and precisely for the reason why the stock to flow model worked. Because when there's a halving, so basically the amount of new Bitcoin coming into circulation is divided by 2, your asset becomes twice scarcer in the sense of the stock to flow ratio, because you have much fewer new assets compared to the quantity of asset available. So it had some merit. Nowadays, we have about 900 new Bitcoins per day that are coming in the new circulation, while the amount of Bitcoin that is being traded every day is so much more superior that the new amount of Bitcoin in circulation is negligible. So for all practical purposes, the new supply is negligible, and therefore the halving theory does not hold anymore. It is always good because it creates some buzz. There's some big stuff happening in Bitcoin, and there's it's happening smoothly, exactly as the code was written and released on the 3rd of January 2009, and still today it happens exactly the same way. So it's smooth. So it's always, let's say, a media buzz, but from an economics perspective, it does not make much sense anymore. So the halving was useful, but it's no longer the case. Now, you mentioned the other metrics, so like the log chart, how this evolves. This can be useful if you can compare it to the right things. I've compared, for example, the level of adoption of Bitcoin with the level of adoption of the internet. Of course, delayed by, 25 years or so. And you could see that actually the two of them are overlaying very nicely. So Bitcoin is being adopted at roughly the same pace as the internet was being adopted in the 90s. And if you continue on that path, then the future price of Bitcoin should indeed reflect much higher price than today, because you make the assumption that it will continue to be adopted similarly to how the internet was adopted, which I think is a perfectly fair assumption. It is just a superior new technology. The same way the internet decentralized information, you have Bitcoin that now decentralizes a monetary asset. It decentralizes money. So you can make a parallel between the two. The adoption curves seem to be very similar so far, and it is reasonable to assume they will continue. So this is one of the valuation methods that you could use to assess what price of Bitcoin you could have in the future at different points in time. This is useful. Now, the shorter you get in time frame, the more crystal ball it becomes. If you look at 200-day charts, I mean, you're basically looking at into a 6-month trend. It may indicate what is the current sentiment on the market, but it does not tell you much about the future beyond a few months ahead. Even for a few months ahead, things can turn very, very quickly. So the last 6 months were pretty negative for Bitcoin. The previous 6 months were neutral, and the 6 months before that were very positive. So your 200-day chart would give you very different inputs that would have been incorrect in every one of these phases. The longer you look, so the bigger your time horizon, the most you can infer from it. But at the same time, you cannot rely on it completely. You need to take into consideration what are fundamental shifts in the environment. Bitcoin before 2020 was a fundamentally different instrument from Bitcoin after the pandemic had started. When the pandemic started, you had highly inflationary policies in fiat terms, and therefore the valuation of the asset, so an asset that cannot be inflated, was very different, because the asset all of a sudden became a lot more attractive. When in 2023 you had the US generally accepted accounting principles that accepted to change how they value Bitcoin, how you can account for Bitcoin from looking at it as an intangible to looking at it from fair value accounting. That was a fundamental change, because now all of a sudden you do not penalize companies for holding Bitcoin on their balance sheet. So you open the market to a lot more potential demand. So it was a completely different instrument. When at the beginning of 2024 you had exchange traded funds on Bitcoin that were released, you have again a complete structural shift in what Bitcoin is, because you open the market to so many more investors. There are plenty of investors, investment funds that can only invest in specific types of assets, specific funds, specific qualified investors. They can invest into a BlackRock issued Bitcoin ETF, but most of them either are not allowed by their mandate or do not have the technical knowledge on how to invest any reasonable, any significant amount of money into the asset directly. Holding Bitcoin in self-custody is fine for you and I when we have a few hundreds or thousands of euros in it, but an institution willing to invest hundreds of millions into Bitcoin in self-custody, they better think about it twice. So going back one step, you had different phases in the history of Bitcoin. Yeah. Every structural phase would significantly change the value of the asset and the potential of the asset. It always evolved for the better, and we are now again at a stage where there are plenty of very good developments for Bitcoin happening. We have regulatory clarity pretty much all over the world. We have fiscal clarity. We have adoption not only by cypherpunks and hardcore tech people, but also by traditional finance and institutions and even nation states in many cases. So the asset is being adopted, is being accepted. So we are entering again a new phase for the future of Bitcoin. This new demand, this new phase of adoption has not been reflected yet into the price, but I have no doubt that it will be so. Let's say in the coming year or two, we will have a much better reflection of this new phase into Bitcoin price that is currently, in my opinion, exceptionally low by many metrics. Again, I'm not saying anything for short term, but there are many metrics suggesting that we are currently pretty much in the lowest phase of the cycle and ready to go to the next leg up.
Which metric would you recommend?
I always like to start with the fear and greed index, because as simple as this metric is, it actually combines a lot of things. It combines how the asset has been trading lately, but also, and importantly, what is the general sentiment on social media and in newspaper about Bitcoin. Currently, or let's say the last month, we have seen multiple times reaching new all-time lows in terms of the fear and greed index. Never have we had such negative general sentiment about the asset compared to where it is. And if you compare that to where we were just a few years ago in 2021, the very peak of the cycle, the absolute blow off top where there was complete irrational exuberance, we were not even at the level where Bitcoin is today. So now we are at the most fearful moment, and we are higher than at the most optimistic irrational exuberance moment from 4 or 5 years ago at the top of the 2021 cycle. So it also indicates how much we have strengthened the fundamentals. That the very worst you can possibly imagine is still better than the absolute best irrational top of a few years ago. Something you cannot possibly say from any from other assets that do not face these kind of volatile cycles of ups and downs, but therefore also do not produce the same kind of upside potential return.
Do you think the demand is in general higher in the private world or in the corporate world?
The demand is everywhere. Any private individuals has a need for saving the value of its work to the future. Any institution has that same need. They want to save the value of their wealth for the future. Any corporation has this need. Any church, any cooperation between multiple individuals, any group, formal or informal, has a need to gather wealth from today to tomorrow. This need is best addressed with Bitcoin. No matter who you are, no matter whether you are an individual, a corporate, an institution, or a nation state. The demand is at each level. For all of them, Bitcoin is a superior asset to manage your wealth. And in the future, that will just be represented. The same way there's demand for money and stocks and other store of value assets today, there will be the exact same demand flowing to Bitcoin at each level in the future.
When did someone decide to implement Bitcoin into their treasury? It goes
at a different pace for different entities. In the early days, that was obviously mostly individuals. Now we are definitely seeing a lot of institutions that have come in, and we are seeing increasingly more corporates. So now that there is more clarity, regulatory and fiscal, about having Bitcoin on your balance sheet as a treasury asset, how to account for it, how to report it, and so on, you have more and more corporates, typically small and mid-sized corporates first, that feel comfortable buying some Bitcoin, and many of them do that with Relai. We are definitely seeing this segment increase quite rapidly. At the same time, it will still take a while. You will have people that will take another decade or multiple decades before even trusting it enough to put that on their balance sheet. The same way, it's not the day after the plane was invented that anybody would feel comfortable flying on a plane. You do want to see it flying often. You do want it to establish itself, to be globally accepted before really trusting your life into it. That happened for the plane, and that happened to some extent with Bitcoin, the same way it happens also with pretty much any other innovation. People want to see the proof of concept and proof of being accepted by their peers before getting into it. There are some earlier adopters, but there are also some late majority and laggards that will still take probably years, even decades, before stepping foot into that.
Yeah, which function is the most optimal right now? Should he use it for transactions? Should he use it for treasury? Or what was the most optimal right now?
Any monetary asset will go through different evolutions, and in particular 3 phases. It always starts first as a store of value. Only when it's established as a store of value, it will become a medium of exchange. And only once it is established as a medium of exchange, it will become a unit of account. So first, store of value, that's the phase in which we are in. Of course, it is possible to use Bitcoin to trade. Some people do that, but it is only marginal at the moment. I mean, it's increasing very rapidly, but it's still a very small fraction of the market. We are not in the mass adoption phase of the medium of exchange function. We are still in the mass adoption phase, the early mass adoption phase of the store of value asset function. And let alone a unit of account. I mean, there are only exceptionally few people who would value other goods in terms of Bitcoin. I mean, we are doing our financial statements not only in fiat, but also in Bitcoin. Because this is the metric that we want also to, these are the metrics we want to optimize. We want to know how many Bitcoins we have on our treasury and how many Bitcoin we can accumulate. That matters to us. But beyond beyond Bitcoin companies, very few would do that at this stage. We will get there eventually, but this one will still take probably many decades to get to.
And which business has the most interest right now? Is there a particular sector who has more interest than another one?
Interestingly, there's no one sector that is mostly flowing into Bitcoin. It's rather diverse. So we are seeing small and mid-cap companies. So typically, one-person company or a few people in the company getting some Bitcoin on their balance sheet, and it can go from any industry. So we have some bricklayers, we have some real estate company, we have some gold companies, we have some dentist, accounting firms, we have just name it. Typically, the small and medium enterprises, they are the ones who are currently adopting Bitcoin.
What are the most important factors a business has to look at to implement Bitcoin on their balance sheet?
Understand what you're doing, in the sense, learn a little bit about Bitcoin, because nothing pains me more than seeing somebody FOMO buy into Bitcoin, and then Bitcoin drops 10% as it does regularly, and then they panic and panic sell everything. I'm like, if you panic sell at the first 10% dip, then you really didn't understand what you owned in the first place. Bitcoin will drop and it will rise, and typically the rise are rather sudden. It's just a few days a year where you see most of the return, and most of the time it will feel like pain because you always compare to the top point. 5 years ago, if we had said Bitcoin at $70,000, people would have been euphoric because they compared it to Bitcoin at 20,000. But now people compare it to Bitcoin at 126,000, where it was at the beginning of October, and therefore they think, oh, it's a 45% drop or something. So Bitcoin will drop and it will rise, and it does not matter. Don't look at it over a short term, look at it over the long term. If you have some funds that you would like to keep for the long term and that you would like to see grow, then Bitcoin is the right place to be in, because everything indicates that it will grow over time. Of course, it is not an absolute guarantee, nothing is, but the adoption curve and interest in Bitcoin and countless other metrics suggest that the future of Bitcoin is absolutely bright, and that it is valuable for any company who has cash on hand to invest at least part of this cash into Bitcoin.
What are the main risks of investing in Bitcoin?
The main risk that is often understated is simply the risk of stupidity, in the sense, do not lose your private key. If you can save your private key at a place that only you have access to and that you can not lose, then you should be fine. That's the main operational risk. Then from financial risks, you have, of course, the volatility that is not negligible for Bitcoin. And for the rest, honestly, most of the other risks are stripped out of Bitcoin by design. You do not have counterparty risk because there is no counterparty. You do not have reinvestment risk because there is no cash flows or maturity where you need to reinvest at a certain rate. You don't have, take every traditional risk except volatility, so market risk. They are stripped out of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is already a bare instrument, in a sense, a simple instrument with few very understandable, very measurable risks that offers you a clear value, that is the ability to have a scarce digital commodity on your balance sheet. The same way you would want to have a scarce asset that cannot be easily censored or that cannot be inflated to zero, you would want to have Bitcoin for these reasons.
Do you have a special strategy for securing your private keys?
There are many that are so this is a topic that has been discussed extensively. There are many ways of doing it. In a nutshell, make sure that your private keys are generated in a way that is genuinely random. So not that you select the words of your seed phrase, because this is absolutely not random and prone to selecting this. You are prone to selecting the same words as somebody else would, and therefore having a clash.
You shouldn't do that.
You should find a random generator to generate your private key. Do not take the list of seed words and select, or I will select the first 12 words of the list and that will be my private key. Don't do that. I mean, that's ridiculous. And plenty of people have done that, and you will end up with the exact same public address as other people, and therefore you do not generally own the Bitcoin, since others have your private key.
But you could generate random, so you could pick random words from
if you can have something that picks the word genuinely randomly, then yes. However, the human mind is extremely bad at randomness. We are very, very bad at it, in the sense that if you think you are just selecting random words, actually the pattern is pretty recognizable. There are quite a lot of studies on this, so do not trust your own judgment to select words that you think are random. Find a proper random generator. One way of doing it is simply to flip a coin or to use dice. That's one way that is already better than just trusting your gut feeling on which words you want to select. So that's one of the best practices. Secondly, save at least 2 versions of your private key, or your seed words is the same. Do not have it at a single place, not just in your wallet or just in your safe, because if something happens, well, you're done. Your Bitcoin are gone and you will never see them again. So at least 2 versions, and at the same time, don't make too many of them. Don't do 20 of them, because at every place where you hide it, if somebody finds it, well, then that person has access to your Bitcoin.
Is there a sweet spot on a maximum?
This typically between 2 and 4. That's what I would recommend. People might have different opinions. I've heard 2 rather often. Some people prefer 3. I've heard 6, but let's say between 2 and 4 is probably the right amount. And possibly recommendable is to split your seed phrase into 2 parts. First, use a seed phrase of 24 words, not just 12 words, if you do that. I will explain in a minute why. So let's say you have your seed phrase of 24 words. You write the first 12 words, the next 12 words, and you hide them at different places. Yeah, and then you have 2 or 3 copies at different places, so that if somebody finds it, they still cannot do anything with it. Yeah. Never split a seed phrase that is only 12 words. Because if you have only 12 words, you have 6 words on one hand and 6 words on the other. Well, actually, if you only have 6 words, it's fairly easy for a computer to find out all the other combination of the other 6. Since there are 2048 possibilities for every word, if you had only 1 word, that's 2048 possibilities. If you have 2 words, that's 2048 exponent 2. With 3, it's exponent 3, and so on. So 2048 exponent 6 is actually not that much for a computer to figure out. 2048 exponent 12 is so unbelievably much that no computer in the world, including the most advanced computers today, could ever find it in, let's say, in our lifetime.
Okay, where's the difference between 12 words and 24
between
words?
12 and 24, for all practical purposes, it does not change much. I mean, of course, it is not twice more secure. It is 248 exponent 12 times more secure, because it is a multiplicative effect with every additional word.
Theoretically, 24 words would be more secure than 12 words.
Correct, like many times more secure.
Okay.
This being said, it is, for any computer nowadays, it makes no difference. In both cases, you are absolutely safe. Like, if somebody tries to brute force your seed phrase, they will not find it if you have 12 words. If you have only 6 words, however, if you lost the shard of your seed phrase with the first 6 words, and the person only needs to find out what are the other 6, well, that is pretty easily findable with brute force. So split your seed phrase only if you have 24 words seed phrase, not with 12 words seed phrase.
What is your opinion on multi-sig wallets? When does a multi-sig wallet make sense? When a single-sig?
For a company, multi-sig makes definite sense if you want to. Well, it depends what you want to share and who you want to have access to. Let's say if you have the 3 founders of a company and you want to do a 2 out of 3 multi-sig, well, any 2 people could move the funds. That's fine. If one person dies or loses seed phrase, you are still fine because the other 2 can do it. If 2 of them lose their seed phrase, then you're screwed. The last one does not help. So it's always a balancing act. So in order to prevent that from happening, you maybe want to do a 2 out of 4 multi-sig. But the 2 out of 4 is also more risky in the sense that 2 people could be left out, and you just have 2 people who need to collude to move the funds. So maybe you want to do a 3 out of 5 or a 3 out of 6. It depends on your use case. There is the right balance for everybody, but it depends on how well they are secure, whether you have copies, how much you trust the people involved, and of course operational simplicity. If you are an exchange who needs to trade many times a day, and you secure your funds out of a 3 out of 5 multi-sig, well, that's not going to be efficient, because every single time, you need to ask the 3 people to sign the same transaction before being able to broadcast it on the mempool. So yeah, there are pros and cons and use cases for every type, but multi-sig is definitely one of the very valuable security framework that you should consider.
In case of security, when you put a single sig and a multi-sig next to each other, is a multi-sig more secure?
It depends what you mean with secure here. From what I understand about cybersecurity, the key is, so the Bitcoin on the blockchain are secured the same way. So it's not that one is more secure. Where it is more secure is that if one of the 2 of the multisig is lost or stolen, if one of the 2 is stolen, then your funds are still safe. But if you have a certain amount of multisig that is required that are lost, then you cannot move your funds. So it is, again, a balancing act. You have more of one type of risk and less of another type of risk. So you need to do it in a smart way, think it through. It just takes a few minutes to find out what would be optimal in your circumstances. But there is definitely a right middle ground for every company and every family.
Do you have multi-sigs as well on Relai?
Yes, we are using the best practices from the industry in order to manage our Bitcoin. We are doing that with an enormous amount of care, and in order to make sure that any material amount of Bitcoin is exceptionally well secured. Now, I will not go into details of how we are securing it, because that would be revealing already too much about our setup and putting ourselves at risk. So one of the key rules is that we do not share too much about how we are set up, but basically state-of-the-art best practices of the industry, we have thought it through absolutely incredibly thoroughly together to make it happen the best way possible.
Okay, and can some other business owners use multi-sigs on Relay, on the app?
No, on the Relay app, no, not directly.
Okay.
Relay is mostly there for buying and selling Bitcoin at this stage. I do not remove the possibility that we might develop this as a feature in the future, but we see that the current demand is mostly on just getting some exposure to Bitcoin. We are still in relatively early phase. Most people are not hardcore Bitcoiners who think about multisig yet. Most people just want to have some Bitcoin. We're still in that phase. And at Relay, we are trying to be the simplest app possible, the simplest way possible for you to get Bitcoin in self-custody. This is the added value that we offer. And starting with multisig and everything, while those are great technologies, that would dilute the simplicity that we're trying to offer. So we're trying to keep it the simplest possible, at least for the time being. Other options might be something we'll add in the future.
Where do you want to go with this in future? What is your vision in general?
So for now, we see that there are other features that are more in demand that are more in demand that we would like to develop first. Multisig, not much in demand, at least for our target users at this stage. Something like savings buckets is much more in demand. Like you would want to buy some Bitcoin, but maybe you want to have on your app a bucket. Those are saving for a holiday. Those are saving for my son. Those are saving for my daughter, and those are saving for myself or anything else. And every week, for example, you would buy 100 euros of Bitcoin for each bucket, or 50 euros for one bucket, 200 euros for another bucket, whatever you choose. Those are kind of features that are actually more in demand that we are currently developing. Something more down to earth, not so much on the technical side, but more, something user facing that actually improve the user experience.
What is your long-term goal? So where do you see yourself in 10 years?
Especially in the last years and months, I've been more and more realizing how looking far in the future is difficult because the world is changing so fast. So my answer will not be something accurate, but I know a direction of travel. Direction of travel is to stay in the Bitcoin world, because I know that Bitcoin is probably the most transformative technology of our lifetime. I mean, there is Bitcoin, there is AI. Those are really the two things that are changing everything. So Bitcoin is the digital capital, AI is the digital brain, digital intelligence. Those are two things that are changing everything, and that will change everything in the coming years. So somewhere with these two, so using digital intelligence to create a better world based on digital capital. So that's the direction of travel. Right now, I think that I'm at the perfect place with being in the leadership team of one of the top Bitcoin exchanges in Europe. That's probably the place where I can use my skills the best at this stage. But let's see what the future brings.
Did you ever consider or thought about starting creating your own company?
So there are many people at Relay that are early entrepreneurs, and that requires a specific type of person. I'm not sure that I'm the type of person for being a very early entrepreneur, which is also testified by my background. I worked in very large companies, and now I come at a later phase of the development of Relay, not in the very early days, but more in the scale-up phase. And I think that's probably where I see myself best. So I think that, structuring a company for the scale-up phase and entering a highly regulated market and navigating this through the challenges that regulations and larger company brings, that's probably where I would excel better than in the very early stages of entrepreneurship. So I'd rather see myself a bit later on the spectrum from startup to big corporate.
Very nice. What were your key failures or mistakes you have made in your career and general life?
After my MBA, I really thought that pharmaceuticals might be an industry where I would find some, a good reason to be, so where I could excel. And while I did a very decent career in pharmaceutical for 6 years there, that I was not at the right place. My place is in financial services. My place is everything around Bitcoin. That's where I belong. And I was not where I belonged. Probably I needed to see it to understand it, to experience it before I understood it. But that was definitely not the best move at the time, even though I had thought it through thoroughly and I thought it was. But yeah, it's always easy in hindsight. Yeah, there's this. For the rest, I make plenty of mistakes every day. And I think it's also the right thing to do, to try new stuff and fail occasionally, even regularly, as long as you can learn out of it, which is what I'm striving for.
What are your key learnings or principles you still have to this date?
Focus your time, focus your energy, take care of the people who you surround yourself with. Make sure you do something that you believe in and make sure that it benefits the world.
Thank you so much that you had the time to make this podcast. I'm very glad.
The pleasure was mine. Thank you for taking the time as well.
Okay, and yeah, thank you. And have a nice day.
Bye-bye.